what exactly is progress monitoring? And we're going to go back and we're going to use the definitions from NCII. That's the National Center for Intensive Intervention. And two of their frequently asked questions are, hey, wait, my teachers have created all these great questions. Can I just use that? And the feedback on that is, hey, if I'm monitoring how my students are doing on a unit of instruction that I'm teaching, that is a positive connection. But no, that's not progress monitoring, because progress monitoring needs to be valid and reliable. And there's no way to come in and have an independent validation or reliability study on questions that your teachers have developed. So it'll help them monitor their students' progress with content, but not, sorry about that, but not provide progress monitoring against the standards. And that's the clear difference between those two. And I'll recap that on the next slide as well. One other question that we frequently hear is, well, wait. You guys have these individualized learning assignments. Many of you are using our individualized learning assignments. Can I just use the unit scores from those? You know, aren't they aligned to standards? Well, yeah, they are aligned to standards, but we fall into the same business where we fell into with teacher created. That's going to let you know how the student is making progress on content, the content that they were instructed, not how they're making progress towards standards. And again, NCII has clearly explained that whatever you're using for progress monitoring must live separately from what you're working on for intervention or instruction. And that way you're monitoring progress against that wider set of standards, not progress on how a student understood content as it was delivered inside your curriculum or inside a unit of instruction that they might have engaged in with Classworks. So it's really critical, the order that we look at those two words. Progress monitoring is not just monitoring progress. They work separately. As I've said a couple of times since we got started, Classworks Progress Monitoring, we're really proud that we carry the highest rating for validity and reliability from NCII. And because of that, you can trust that the probes are independent of our curriculum. It's going to monitor progress over 12 weeks. We'll talk a little bit if you really always want it to go to 12 weeks or what some schools do based on their own calendars. There are 20 different parallel forms, so students are getting that touch point that is not repetitive. And if, going back to teacher created, could you imagine a teacher creating 20 parallel forms and then going to get them rated and scored for validity or reliability? That's a lot on a teacher, and their plates are already super full. And then one of the best benefits is the fact that all of the data is gathered in one location and it is automatically graphed. So you're able to see rate of improvement and trends over time. And we'll go in and look at some of our students here in just a few minutes as we go. As we're starting to dig into this, I know I heard Melissa mention this in her session, and we were talking about who is monitoring the progress or who's managing progress monitoring for groups of students. Quick kind of just touch point. Who in your building is responsible for making sure students that have progress monitoring engaged are completing it consistently and with intention? So I want to give you a second here to look at these two lists. And ideally, these are the people that really need to be the ones driving the boat, so to speak. They're the teachers who have the most touch point with the students, and their student groups are probably manageable, up to about 25 students. Underneath the reality column, that's when we're starting to get something started. If we just go in and hit the start button, are we really going to be monitoring the progress? And if I'm working underneath that list, those individuals might be monitoring the progress for 100 or 200 kids. So I'm going to give you a second and I want you to think, where are you right now? Are you under ideally? Are you kind of over here in reality? Or are you kind of here in the middle? Okay, where are you? And I'm going to ask you to put a number in chat. And there's everybody's in the same starting point. You know, some of us have really got a routine down, and some of us might be working on polishing that routine up. So if you feel that most of the time you're underneath ideally, go ahead and type a 1 in chat. If you're kind of half and half between these two columns, go ahead and put a 2. And if right now you're here because you're in reality and you want to try and get over here, go ahead and put a 3. Good mix. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to dig into some elements and some routines for Classworks with progress monitoring and how choosing the correct one, the most appropriate one for each of your students can be managed. We will come back and talk about those 3 columns with some new information, and we'll see where we end up at the end. So I'm going to go into our product. And I know I heard Jennifer mention that we're on our demo site, and we have a very small group of students that we use for demonstration. And all of these guys are actually located in Atlanta, in Georgia. So these are my kids that I'm going to be talking about today. So I'm going to scroll down so we can get down here to somebody that's not at the top of the list. So that lets me just get all the way down here. And I am going to pick on for Melissa here. All right, so let's just recap where we were from Jennifer. Melissa took the screener. I know she took the screener because I have these 4 colors, and the caret points down at the yellow, and that's the tier that her score placed her in as far as needing that level of support. So she scored between the 10th and the 25th. And if you hover, you can see all that information. I want to know a little bit more than that with Melissa. So I'm going to go ahead and click her name and look at her screening data. So Melissa took the reading screener. Okay, here's her score. Got to see that on the first screen. Now I'm going to come down and look at her domains. So she took the 8th grade screener. She scored at each of these grade levels. And I need to decide which area is of greatest need for Melissa and where might I need to offer her some additional support. Now, I can choose between any of these. Melissa is just a student with an RTI support plan. She does not have an IEP. And so I don't have that to worry about. We'll look at a student that does in a few minutes. And I want to think about what is Melissa going to have on her high stakes test? And where should I start her when it comes to progress monitoring? And just double check all that information. I'm gonna leave it open to y'all. Do you think grammar usage and mechanics would be something that she'd have on her high stakes test that she would need additional support with? I mean, she's only 1 grade level below. That doesn't seem to read it to me at all. Reading, yeah. But when I think about the science of reading and how foundational literacy skills build upon each other, I might come down here and look at word analysis. And wow, that's really, really low. And that might be where I want to go. Now, she's an 8th grader. I got to keep that in mind when I'm going to go get her started. So while she might be here, I might not take her that far down because I need her to make up as much time as possible. So I'm going to go over here and click start for her. Now, one thing, if you don't write down anything else from this session, There's a two-parter I want you to make sure you make a note about. The first one is you need to click skills-based. By default, it starts here on curriculum sampling. You need to go over here and click skill-based. That's part one. Part two is these three domains are going to be listed here in alphabetical order. I know when you open it up and it says grammar, usage, mechanics, you think, oh, that's the one that they're supposed to start with. No, it's just a list. So let's go down and look at this word analysis one. Now with Melissa, if all I have is her high stakes test, I can leave it right here. It says that level 1 is where they recommend her. And I could go ahead and just click start and get her going. But you'll notice I could click this just to make sure that those questions are the ones that are going to fit her. And because Melissa's an 8th grader and we're bopping all the way down here for a student that doesn't have an IEP, I might, as an educator, want to know a little bit more before I got her started. Or I might let her start here, collect 3 or 4 weeks of data, and if it tells me she's growing, I'm going to move her. And I'm going to be clear with her that that's what needs to happen so that she can grow. And then I click the start button. And Melissa's going to get a progress monitoring probe next week. Super easy, super straightforward for her. Now, I do have another student that has an IEP, and that's this student down here, Deanna. Now, Deanna's IEP, again, is going to all be about reading. She does better with the word analysis piece when words are separated for her. So if she's looking at one word or a list of just words, she's able to decode, she's able to apply grade level phonics. But when she has connected text in a sentence or a paragraph, she gets a little lost when it comes to answering questions about understanding what that text said to her. And her IEP goal is written that way. So I know how she did. I'm just double checking this. Now, there's another tool that because she has a standards-based IEP goal that I can use. And I'm going to walk you through the steps to get to this tool. And as we go, I'll let you know what to bookmark if you are on your own, or you might just want to jot down what to bookmark if you're not following along on your device. I know I've got different learners in the room. So if I hit the question mark down here, this is going to open up to our help center. It's a bridge. And I'm looking for, how do I know what to progress monitor a student on who has an IEP? And it's actually one of our most viewed articles. It's right here. How do I select that? So I'm just going to go ahead and click that. Now, my preference, I like to use this little icon right here. Looks like a square with a diagonal arrow. I like to use this because it pops the screen up so that it is full page. And as soon as I have that open, I can actually bookmark that screen. So I would bookmark this screen, especially if your role is going back to your school after our sessions and relaying what we talked about or showing the video or anything like that. And this article will provide you step by step what I'm going to walk you through. So why I recommend bookmarking it is because it does provide that guidance. And you're going to see here 2 links. That first link is the one that we're going to go and look at in more detail. And if you click that one while I'm talking, go ahead and bookmark it. And then thanks to one of our customers in York, District 1 down here in South Carolina, you also have the employability standards. So for South Carolina high schoolers that work towards a different degree or diploma, that's available as well. So depending on which one you want to go look at, you can just go ahead and click it and open it up. And it's going to come up and look like this. And I'm going to give y'all just a second in case you're doing all these steps. And while you're looking there, I'm going to go back and look at my friend Deanna again. So Deanna is a seventh grader. And we talked about the fact that she has a reading goal for her IEP. So what I'm going to do is back on this tool that I bookmarked, I am going to make sure I have reading, and I'm going to select my state. All of the states are listed here. So I'm going to scroll on down, and I'm actually in Charleston. So I'm going to grab South Carolina. And we just said that Deanna was a seventh grader. So that's her grade level. Now, when I come back here, I might be able to look at what grade level is her reading at, but I probably, because she has an IEP, I probably want to go look at that IEP goal. What goal is that? What grade level is that goal written towards? So in our situation, we're going to imagine that it's written towards a grade 3 because I know that the Classworks screener is readiness, not proficiency. So her proficiency level is probably lower than that readiness level. So I'm going to go ahead and choose third grade here. Now, what I have is I have a listing. Go ahead and look that up. I have a listing of all of the standards, all the different layers, and then over here, if I'm going to start progress monitoring her at her present level, this would be the domain that is recommended by Classworks to start for her. So I can find the standard that is on her IEP goal. And let's say that it is this one right here with summarizing. Summarizing seems to be something that a lot of our students struggle with. Let's say that's her goal. What I will do is come back here and I will click start for her. Skill-based. I remember I need to choose reading. Oh, sorry about that, reading. And, oh, wait, Joanne, it clicked 4. I don't want 4. Just click the third grade and it'll automatically move. And I am ready to hit start. Now you'll notice I haven't talked about this part yet, the rate of improvement goal. I'm going to come back and talk about it with a couple of our students, but what is really important is the fact that progress monitoring is designed to lift students' confidence level. Yes, they're going to get more practice on a certain domain or a certain set of skills, but the practice should in turn lead to them feeling more confident about their abilities with that domain or with those skills. So since I'm trying to build confidence, I'm going to start most of my students at a moderate rate of growth. If they start to make growth, and they're making the expected growth, and they're staying on target, I can change this to aggressive anytime I want to. I don't have to start or stop anything. I can make that adjustment anytime during their set. Doesn't matter. Okay. So we've got 2 students started. And what we're going to do now is after I get my students started, I really want to come in here and make sure that my students are doing what I've asked them to do. So I'm not going to ask this question for a chat, but think about it. If you have an Instapot at home, you put everything in it and you push that start button and it's done. It's like cruise control or a self-driving car that has no flaws, right? Progress monitoring, it requires you to not just hit the start button, but kind of go back in time a little bit with cooking and open the oven, stir, adjust the temperature, because what you want to come out depends on a lot of factors. More factors than we now have with a closed environment in an Instapot. So I've gotten progress monitoring started for a group of my kids here. And I'm going to set up these filters over here. And I have my class. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say I only want my students that have a session, so an active progress monitoring. Then I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to click this box right here that says ROI, and that stands for rate of improvement. All right, so I've started progress monitoring. I now need to go back in and look and see how are my students that have progress monitoring on, how are they doing? What's going on? So I'm going to look here at Marcia, and I'm going to go back in time. And I know we had this question, I think earlier, all of the sessions that a student has had all year, whether they're started and stopped or adjustments are made, you can go back in time and see all of them, even when this session is over. So I'm going back to a session Marcia had about a month ago, and the teacher deactivated it for a reason and started a new session for her. So as Marcia comes in and completes her progress monitoring probes, there's a bunch of things that I can see on this screen. So at the top, I can see how she's graphed. How did she do each week? I can see a list of the dates she took a progress monitoring probe, a quiz, how much time she spent, and what her score was. And all of these are listed here as skipped because her teacher stopped this session and started a different one. And then all the way down here at the bottom, I have cumulative item response. And this gives me a list of the objectives that were part of every single week. So every single week with skill-based progress monitoring, they get between 11 and 15 questions. And the questions come under these categories. And you'll see that list for each student as you go down to C. I can see if she answered the question correctly, there'll be a green dot, or incorrectly, it'll be a red dot. And I can click on that dot to see the question, what the correct answer was, and if my student made a mistake, I can also see the incorrect choice that they picked. So I have a lot of detail available to me. And then all the way over here on the end, I can see their running average for just that concept. And one of the questions that we get a lot is we have reading, but I need to know about that summarizing. Joanne, how did you do with summarizing? That's what her goal is on her IEP. Right here, she gets a question on each of those about can she summarize? And an underlying cause with summarizing is identifying the main idea and details. That's really what constructs that summary. So I actually have multiple indicators here that let me know how is she doing with that goal area or that concept or standard. So that gives me a bunch of information on her. Let's come back up and take a look at her graph for a second. My friend Marcia here, she did really well on the first week. How impressive to come in with that 73. And then something happened here. And here's her third score. She went right back up. As soon as Classworks, as soon as the student has done their first 3 probes, we now know if they're below target or on target for growth because we have their baseline. And because we got our baseline, what was drawn for her was what do we need her to do? She needs to score above this green line in order to be on target. And the yellow line is her, in reality, what's her actual trend line? And she seems to be hot and then cold. And that's what we have from her here. Now I'm going to go up and show you her current one. She started a brand new session and she did her first probe last week. Now there aren't any green or yellow lines on this graph yet because we need her first 3 scores to have a baseline. So if you're looking at a graph and there is no green or yellow line, that's because we don't have 3 scores. She seems to really struggle with getting things started and then being consistent. And so that might be something that we'd want to talk with her about if I were helping monitor her progress monitoring. Now, before I go back to the slide deck, I'm going to just touch one more thing here. Well, take that back, 2 more things here. One is up here, when I change to rate of improvement, what this tells me is I have one student, we know it's Marcia because we just looked at her. I have one student that is below target on her growth. I have 2 students that are on target, so they're staying closer above that green line, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that in a minute. But I have 7 students that are in the gray. And what that means is that we don't have those 3 scores yet. And the part that comes down with that is I want to look at this list. If I have Audrey and she's on week 2, it makes sense. She hasn't had 3 weeks. There's no way she could have done and had done all 3 of her first 3 probes if she's only on week 2. And I can see here she hasn't done hers yet this week because I have this big yellow diamond that tells me that. George I have, he's already done his this week. There's no diamond here. He's done his job. And I look down here at Gianna's done her job. But with all of these students, like this student here, Connie, she's on week 6, but it still says to be determined. One of the roles of monitoring this to make sure students are getting the impact from it is that the students are actually completing it. And what I can see from just this is Connie's had 6 weeks and she has not done 3 out of 6 of those. Because if she had, this would not be gray. So I'll just verify that here. Here's Connie. So Connie needs some support on getting her to complete this. And that might mean that our teachers need to develop routines or procedures or set expectations for students around when should I be completing my progress monitoring. And why do we want to make sure that they complete those progress monitoring probes is as they work, their individualized learning plan gets adapted based on how they do on those weekly probes. So that's one of the reasons that it's critical. What we looked at inside the program was where you would see the rate of improvement, how that graph is built based on the student's performance. You could see all those skills and look at their running averages through that cumulative item response. So those were a couple of the pieces. And when you're talking about reviewing that data as the person who's managing this for your students, those are the parts that you really want to make sure are checked in on at least monthly. As soon as we have those first 3 baseline scores, you can definitely dig in more detail, but you want to set that routine or that expectation so that you get those first 3 baseline scores during the first 3 weeks of the probe being active. We've talked a little bit about a 4-point rule. You're going to see a lot more about this tomorrow afternoon in a session with Jennifer and Melissa, but it really comes down to a graph and where are my students? Because I want to make sure that what they're working on with progress monitoring is a productive struggle. It shouldn't be super easy, but it also shouldn't be super difficult. because I'm trying to build their confidence level. And the last part is I've got all this great data, Joanne. What do I do with it? Who do I share it with? And I know Jennifer took you through the reports menu as you were building that universal screener report. But just super quickly, under reports, you have progress monitoring and the steps that you can follow to schedule it. And I knew there was a question in an earlier session about the weeks. You hit create, you choose your school, and I'm going to go through this quickly. We do have a super great video on our YouTube channel that does this in much more detail. Again, whatever's in this box will be on the report, but also if you're going to schedule it to come to you repeatedly, it'll also be the subject line. So if you want to call it progress monitoring reports, so you always can find them, that would be something that you might want to do. Individual kid, I can choose which subject I want. And then I have a couple of options here. I can print current and finished, and I can print their ILP or their skill progress. And I'm just going to go ahead and choose both of those here really quickly. When I choose weekly, all right, if I want to get this every week, which, wow, that's a lot, I want to choose the end of the week. That will have everything from the previous week. If I'm coming back to school, like down here on Monday, if you run one of these reports to come weekly on Tuesday, you're only ever going to get what happened that Sunday and that Monday. So really recommend that you get it near the end of the week so that you can look at it, even if you're not going to look at it until the following Monday with your kids. You can set the time and you can tell it when to end and add your users. What this will look like, I'm just going to go back to my sample. What this will look like for you is here's Chester's. And we talked a little bit about a 4-point rule. What I'm looking for are, where are the dots? Are there an equal number of dots, which are Chester's scores, above the green line and below the green line? Or are they all super low or super high? And that's something that I can use to help me decide, does he need something adjusted? And then I selected the intervention skills. This now lets me know all of the units that he's been working on that are connected to this progress monitoring session. So I am able to see all of that on one report. And these reports are priceless when it comes to sharing progress with students' parents as part of progress reports that go home in general, and then also at the close of the 9 weeks, or for students that have an IEP ahead of any of those IEP revision or adjustment meetings. So last part, wow. Last part I wanted to dig into super quickly, and I know there's questions, is the insights piece. If you're a building or district level staff member and you have insights, under progress monitoring, makes it super streamlined for you when you're coming in to see how are my students doing. The one thing I'm going to say on here is uncheck the completed status. That way you're filtering out the sessions that are done, that are no longer active. And then if you'll scroll down, the first thing you'll want to start to monitor are these 2 pies. Participation count is all about, are the students completing it every week? The goal is the blue section, which is high participation, which is 80% of the time. You want that to be as big as possible. All students have to do is finish their probe every week to be considered part of the blue. High participation means they completed it at least 80% of the time. Moderate is between 80 and 50, and low is less than 50. That's the first hurdle. After that hurdle is handled, you want to start looking at this rate of improvement count. What you will tend to see when you have a big red section is a big gray section. Because if my kids are not completing it weekly, they're going to be in this to be determined section. So you'll want to start seeing that gray get smaller. And then I have my list of students, so I can quickly see how are each individual student, how are they doing. I can filter this. So if I want to look at a specific grade, like there's a lot of fifth graders being progress monitored, I can just click that grade level band right there on the number, and it'll update the graph so it's only going to give me them. So that makes it really easy. And these are great screens to show in PLCs because teachers aren't able to see, that level because that's that school or grade level piece. So kind of bring it back full circle. When we talked about where we were, 1, 2, or 3 at the start, if you were to set a goal, even if it's one that you're going to keep to yourself or to your team, is there a move you want to see happen for you? And is there like a single target area you'd like to focus in on? And as you're thinking through that, when you know that, please reach out. You can use hello@classworks.com. You can reach out to your account manager and schedule some connect sessions so that we can help support that as you start to make those adjustments.